yes, women are horny, right? We're all horny. A lot of us like love sex and want sex. It's not the same for men. It's a sort of desperate hunger often that there's this incredible draw. It's like very difficult for them not to look at women's bodies when they're like wearing these tiny little shirts with no bra and their nipples are like boing. Fine, do what you want, but like, yeah, they're gonna look. And it's hard for men. It's very, very hard not to look. A lot of men like want to be good men and they feel they're failing and they are sensitive. They're not just these super tough guys that they look like. They're hurt. They feel invalidated.
Welcome to the Unspeakable podcast. I'm your host, Meghan Daum. Before I introduce my guest, the wonderful evolutionary biologist, Carole Hooven, I want to take a little time and talk with you about a few things. It's nothing earth-shattering, just some things I'd like to explain about the podcast and also a couple of announcements. If you are itching to get to the interview with Carole, you can go ahead and skip ahead about 8 minutes. Otherwise, I want to tell you what's going on with the podcast, what's going on with me, and make a couple of announcements. So I'll start with those. The first is that I am doing a very cool book event for my new essay collection, The Catastrophe Hour, in New York on September 3rd with Lionel Shriver. She is the best-selling novelist, Spectator columnist, friend of the podcast, one of the most interesting, provocative, sometimes maddening, but always entertaining thinkers out there. We're going to be talking about her work, my work, what's going on in the world and the culture. This is happening at the Village Underground Comedy Club from 6 to 7:30 p.m. before the comedy starts. Doors open at 5:15. We'll be selling books. And you can go to meghandaum.com/events to get the link to buy tickets. They are $25, but if you buy before August 1st, you get them for $18. It's a bargain for New York City. Again, September 3rd, 6 p.m. It's going to be great, and I would love to see you there. Speaking of New York City, once again, our Unspeakeasy Ideas Retreat on steroids, mini Ideas Festival, Symposium, Palooza is October 11th and 12th. We have multiple guest speakers. We've got people attending from all over. You've heard me talk about it, but it's kind of hard to explain because there's really nothing else like it. And we've never tried anything like this before. But just as a reminder, the speakers include, I'm going to read from if you're watching on video, I have a cute little postcard with everybody there. John McWhorter, Mike Pesca, Carole Hooven, Lisa Selin-Davis, Alana Newhouse, Rob Henderson, Ben Appel, Peter Moskos, and Andrew Hartz. You know most of them from the podcast, and it's going to be great. I'm going to interview some of them. There'll be panel discussions, and then very quickly, instead of an audience Q&A, it will become a group discussion, totally off the record. No social media, no recording, nothing like that. We're just going to have honest, focused, nuanced conversations about the most complicated and important and fascinating topics out there. So go to theunspeakeasy.com/NYC to find out how to sign up. And we're running a special these days, so you can get a little discount. Okay, so this is what I want to say. I'm recording this on July 8th, and that means that it's been exactly 6 months since I lost my house in the wildfires in Los Angeles. That was January 8th. On January 10th, I released my first dispatch here about the fires. It was an audio essay talking about, among other things, the community I lived in, Altadena. You can go back and listen if you missed it. I went on to drop several more audio essays about the fire. I also did an interview with a neighbor, Erica Schickel, about losing her home. So you saw those in the feed. You started seeing those instead of the regular podcast. Then you started seeing recordings of live streams. So at Substack's behest, I started doing live streams once a week. For a while, it was twice a week, thinking that was the next best thing. And next big thing, not next best thing, the best thing. And that I would scale back the regular podcast in favor of live streams because they're more interactive and everybody likes that, even though people's heads are cut off in the video because nobody knows how to use your phone and you got to use your phone to record them. So I was doing those. Then because my book came out in April, I started dropping audio excerpts from that. That was for the book club that I'm hosting every week for 14 weeks. We're now in week 6. So there was that. In the meantime, I decided that the live stream, even though it was cool and fun, wasn't really a substitute for a nicely produced, carefully conducted podcast interview. So I vowed to resume the once a week podcast, keeping the live stream while also running the book club and releasing the corresponding audio excerpts. In the process, I dropped the ball a few times and didn't always get a weekly podcast out when I said I was going to. Anyway, the reason I'm telling you this is that you may have been a little bit confused lately about what's going on, especially if you became a paying subscriber around the time of the fires. A lot of people supported me at that time. I said I didn't want to start a GoFundMe, but I said, if you want to help me, you can become a paying subscriber to the podcast. And many of you did. And I was really, really appreciative, and I remain so. But I will say that 6 months later, Substack is starting to look a little different. It is overflowing with content. Famous YouTubers and TikTokers are coming in. Best-selling authors are coming in. Celebrities with random deep thoughts are coming in, all competing for your attention. Many of us who were already here are losing subscribers. I am losing subscribers, especially paying subscribers. Every day, the count goes down. And I am not the only one. A lot of us are in this boat. And that is why I want to say how much I appreciate your sticking with me as I've swerved around these last 6 months. If you've been with me a long time, I hope you're here with me for the long haul. If you became a paying subscriber right after the fires to help me out, I really hope you will stay one. In return, I promise to never bring you anything that I don't consider valuable, original, and eminently worth reading or listening to or thinking about. Trying different things means there are hits and misses. It means sometimes I've been late getting something to you, but one thing I will never do is give you something that doesn't meet my standards of quality. I will not waste your time, even if that means wasting my time because I'm re-recording something or not posting something that doesn't hit the mark. And so that is why I ask you again, please, if you are able, stay around as a paying subscriber. I cannot do this podcast if I don't have enough of you. I have to keep my own lights on. I have to pay the people who help me, and they deserve every penny. If this proves to be unsustainable at some point, I will have to stop doing it. Maybe I'll do something very different than I've been doing these many decades. Who knows? So if you haven't been a paying subscriber and have been thinking about becoming one, I would love if you did that. If you are one and you get that renewal notice, I hope you will go ahead and renew. And if you decide not to stay a paying subscriber, I hope you'll consider supporting the work of other people on this platform. These are dizzying times in so many ways. Everyone is asking for your attention. So I want to thank you for continuing to give me yours. In return, I will give you the very best I have to give. And this week's episode falls into that category. I will introduce Carole really quickly so we can get to the interview. Dr. Carole Hooven is an evolutionary biologist and the author of the 2021 book, T, The Story of Testosterone, the Hormone that Dominates and Divides Us. That book, which came out exactly 4 years ago this week, divided a lot of people at Harvard, where she had been teaching for 17 years after earning her PhD. That led her to leaving the university and entering the dissident fray. She's now a non-resident senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and one of my favorite people to talk with about human behavior. So please enjoy this conversation with Dr. Carole Hooven. Carole Hooven, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Meghan. It's so great to see you, and I'm really happy to be here.
I'm always happy to see you. I don't think you've actually been on the podcast itself. You've been a guest in the Unspeakeasy online community. You've been one of our unspeakers. Yep. And you've been to an Unspeakeasy retreat. And we have we know each other and are friends, but I don't think you've actually been an official guest on the podcast. So I'm thrilled to finally have you.
Wait, thank you. Is that right? I thought for some reason
Yes.
it was on like really early on, like in 20.
No, maybe I think you hallucinated that.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Well, great. What a thrill. All right.
I know. I'm delighted. So we can talk about any number of things. I mean, as I said in the introduction, your book on testosterone T came out in 2021. Actually, exactly 4 years ago this week, actually. Do you realize that?
No, thank
Yep.
you.
So this is going to drop.
And then my trouble started very soon after that.
Right.
I knew some sort of anniversary was coming up.
Right. So this is going to drop. We're recording this on July 8th, and hopefully this will drop next week. And so I think that will mark 4 years.
Wow.
Since your book was published in, it was July 2021. And so that thrust you into what we now refer to as the trans debate. And you became a vocal, and I should say exceptionally nuanced and respectful voice in all these conversations around biological sex, the concept of gender, all of that. This resulted in your leaving your position at Harvard, where you'd been teaching a very popular class on hormones and behavior. I don't want to get too much in the weeds here because I want to talk mostly about kind of what you've been thinking about now. It's very similar to stuff I think about. But just so some listeners have some context for you, your troubles started, if I'm remembering correctly, when you started doing media around the book. You appeared on Fox News, as anyone would if they're trying to sell a book. And this upset some graduate students in your department, and your life changed. Can you tell us briefly what happened?
Yes. So I'll try to make it brief. So Fox News was my first, I think, big, I think I had done Joe Rogan actually as my very first podcast. I had
amazing, by the way, huge
came out. Thank you, but that came out before the book came out or anything had happened at Harvard, and I had never been on TV. And it was Katie Herzog had written an article for what was Barry Weiss's Substack at the time, which was an investigation into what was going on in medical schools where medical school professors were backing away from using the terms male and female and pregnant women or pregnant woman. And my whole, my dissertation was on sex differences from an evolutionary point of view in cognition and testosterone. I measured testosterone in the lab. So I, had been doing that since, it's sort of that kind of research started in 99 when I was in Uganda studying sex differences in chimpanzees. Then I came to Harvard, got my PhD, stayed on as a lecturer and eventually co-director of undergraduate studies. So I wrote the book. Katie did this article, and I had been teaching about hormones and behavior from an evolutionary point of view, all aspects of the endocrine system. So I worked with a lot of pre-med students because I did it, they had to learn all of the details about how the endocrine system works. And one unit is on how we become essentially male and female human sexual development, sexual differentiation, et cetera. So when I learned that this was going on, that in medical school, teaching our future doctors that male and female are concepts that they should stay away from, or that there's something wrong with those concepts. Fox News asked me to appear on their show, not to promote my book, but because I had been quoted in Katie's article defending the terms and trying to explain how important and useful they are for science. So I just thought, well, of course I'm going to talk about this. I have a book, I happen to have a book that just came out, and I believe in this wholeheartedly. This is the whole reason, one of the big reasons I'm in academia is because of this field and how important I think the concept of sex is, especially for humans. So I went on Fox and Friends and said, yeah, there are two sexes, and it's not something that you believe about yourself. Sex is something that's it has to do with whether organisms are designed around making sperm or eggs. And that's just a scientific fact. So I was like, there's, the facts of nature over here. And then there's what we do with them over here. And I was like, and we can respect everybody's gender identities and use their preferred pronouns. And that's all I said. And I defended male and female. I didn't even say anything about pregnant women. So the graduate student wasn't just any old graduate student. It was, she was the director of our department's DEI task force. So a lot of the Harvard departments, and I think it's this way at other schools, there's, the central university DEI infrastructure, and then there's the DEI sort of infrastructure within the departments, and those are different. And ours was led by a graduate student, certainly, but full support from the departmental administration in terms of finances, logistics, sending emails around. Faculty would sit on different committees of the task force, the syllabus committee, the who's coming to speak committee, the affinity group meetings. There was a lot going on, especially in 2021. It's still happening now. So she tweeted out representing herself in her official capacity as director of Harvard Human Evolutionary Biology DEI task force. She tweeted that she was appalled and frustrated by my transphobic remarks. And I responded in I thought, a gracious way, and the tweet is still up there on Twitter. And then this got picked up in the international press. It just got a huge amount of press. It's Harvard, and I think from the outside it was ridiculous. Like I didn't do anything wrong, and it signaled to everyone what was going on inside of universities and the intolerance and the lack of viewpoint diversity. So that happened. I had no support from my administration. No one was willing to say, hey, this isn't appropriate. This doesn't represent Harvard's views. It doesn't represent, the department's views. Claudine Gay was just about to become president. She was dean of faculty at the time. Nobody defended me. And my reputation really was taking a huge hit. And as transphobic, I was labeled as transphobic all over the media, suddenly going from nobody to proud of myself for writing a book that got excellent reviews and was doing well. And then suddenly, and I had this great teaching career, and really
you have been very popular.
I love my job. I've been there since 99 getting my PhD, and I knew the university well. I was good at my job. And so I was shocked, hurt, disoriented. And then the chair of a neighboring biology department sent a email complaint around from a trans woman graduate student on their DEI committee about my ostensible transphobia and how people shouldn't go to my book talk. So this, now is circulating around Harvard. A department chair is sending an email saying, we support trans people everywhere, and here's a complaint from our trans woman grad student. So everybody was caving into, they were cowards, and they were afraid that the trans woman would make them look bad if the trans woman wasn't supported. The person who attacked me happened to be a Black woman. So it's just, there's these power issues where I was cast as the bad guy for not, being careful enough about how my words might impact these vulnerable populations, instead of like, hey, we're here to learn how the world works and we're going to have some vigorous debate about people's views. It was more that I did something wrong and these poor, vulnerable people needed to be protected. And that's just, obviously the wrong narrative. I'm not sure if that's gotten any better, actually.
Okay.
Eventually I ended up leaving because nobody was supporting me. I felt very isolated in the department, and the grad student union took a petition out against me, and I was unable to recruit any graduate students as teaching assistants for my course, which, had 760 to 80 students usually. And I couldn't teach it. I had to teach my last course as a seminar because nobody would agree So that was bad. Sucked.
Okay. It sounds like it was extremely sucky and painful. On the other hand, you are in this landscape of, conversations about this stuff. There's a whole world of people talking about gender on podcasts, in alternative media, increasingly in mainstream media. I feel like, you just said a second ago, you're not sure if anything has changed. I think maybe 6 months ago, I would have agreed. I feel like in the last 6 weeks, things have changed. I mean, obviously around the Scrimeti decision, this was the Supreme Court looking at, for rights around transitioning minors medically. That was a big deal. That was considered a win for the gender critical folks and a loss for the trans lobby. We had Andrew Sullivan's piece in the New York Times coming from the perspective of a gay man who was extremely involved in gay civil rights and, rights for gay people to get married, et cetera, saying, hey, the T does not belong in LGB necessarily. And the trans movement has set back the gay movement. And this is something that I've been saying for 7 or 8 years. So it's okay. I mean, a lot of us have been talking about this for a long time. Anyway, my point is you're now in this gestalt. And I'm wondering what you have been thinking about lately, because we can talk about trans like all day, over and over again for years and years. And it kind of, to me, I mean, it never gets boring to me because it's such a rich tapestry, but there's a lot of moving pieces, right? There's a lot of reasons that this movement has caught on. And there's a lot of reasons people are so emotional about it. And it has to do with fundamentally the dynamics between the sexes, not the genders, but the sexes. So I'm wondering like what you've been thinking about lately in terms of all of this.
Okay. So I want to respond to the first thing you said about things getting better. So you didn't mention universities. So I agree with you that things are better clearly in the rest of the world where there are sensible people who are able to speak out. I'm not so sure things have changed within universities. We can talk about what just happened to my husband like last week at MIT. I know something about what's happening at Harvard, and there's obviously been a huge amount of pressure from the Trump administration, particularly on Harvard, to deal with some of the kinds of issues I'm talking about. So, maybe we could talk about that later. But so, I think I'm skeptical. Of course, I'm biased about what is going on in universities because I was so personally harmed. And of course, it wasn't just me. There were a lot of people who were harmed. I think I'm one of the only ones who actually doesn't have a job at a university anymore because of that. But of course, they haven't repaired. They haven't apologized to any of us. Nobody's reached out to me. And that's norm. That's just status quo. So I'm skeptical about that, especially given that Trump is coming after the universities right now. I'm sort of shocked at some of the things that I see that are still going on. So as far as what I'm thinking about, I just also want to note that the particular issue, sort of the trans issue, was never really my issue. I am interested in it. I follow it. I think it's important. My issue around the trans issue isn't any particular policy, but it is, I have this sense of urgency around our ability to have discussions about policy, whether it's trans surgery for minors or participation in female sports for trans women. What I really, really care about more than anything else is that we have the ability to share some common facts, which we don't now, that the production of science and the publication of science stay sort of fair and accurate as possible. And it's not. It's full of ideology and bias. And I think there's a lot of rot, and I see it, inside the institutions, the academy, inside of publishing. So I'm very worried about what's going on in science. I'm worried about language and our ability to just acknowledge that male and female are real, that these are the words we can use to talk about different kinds of people and the rights of women. I'm that's sort of a bigger issue for me, is women's rights, and how do we even have the language and the ability to have discussions about how to protect women. Because as someone who studies sex differences, it's clear to me that male biology is extremely important in understanding what the threats to women are, and that those have to be acknowledged. And that ties in, of course, to the trans issue. So those are the issues that I'm most passionate about right now. But also I'm working on a book. Actually, I'm trying to finish my proposal. I hate to say I wish it had been done by this point, but I'm trying to take on a lot. And there's a lot of, you know how it is, thinking and organization is a huge problem for me. And so what I'm really trying to understand is what's happening culturally around masculinity, and what that has to do with male biology and our failure to fully acknowledge and embrace the fact that males and females evolved to be different in humans and in other animals, and that our culture has failed pretty spectacularly. And there's a long history here, which is actually pretty interesting, that takes us to this moment where our denial of sex differences, I think, undermines, first of all, it's become completely politicized. And with the left, it's actually the extreme sort of progressive side of the left has done a great job at making it uncool to say that male and female are real categories, that they have biological underpinnings, while conservatives are very sensible on this issue and acknowledge the cultural importance of sex differences along with the biological underpinnings of sex. So all the data show that they're much more likely to accept the biological reality of sex compared to progressive. So there's a lot of interesting research there. And I think that there's part of why I'm still working on the proposal is because it's, I want to understand what's happened politically in terms of Trump and the style of Trump and those who support him, something like a MAGA masculinity, which seems like a real backlash to obviously the left's denial of sex and sex differences. And to, I understand if that is what is going on, which it seems like there is a backlash, which is why the Kamala is for they, them, Trump is for you, I think was so successful. I mean, it was completely right. We've lost our minds. I'm a Democrat, actually, and I now don't feel comfortable in my own tribe. But what I now understand is that most Democrats are sensible, but there's been so much fear and silencing and canceling that the loudest voices are the most extreme voices. And I think this has hurt, this whole trend has hurt men in a particular way. It's sort of, I always cry when I talk about this. I know it's ridiculous, but this is why I knew I wanted to write a book about it, because I'm so emotional about it. It seems like such a deep injustice. That, masculinity first has been culturally shamed so much, and that I think started before the Me Too movement, but that, needed to happen. But I think it went a little bit too far, and now hopefully we're swinging back a bit, but that really harmed men who I think rely heavily on culture to help them channel the kind of strong drives that women do not understand, do not possess, and do not understand. And the men hearing this mostly know what I'm talking about, and they feel that generally resonates with them. And that's why I think acknowledging the biology of masculinity, its evolutionary basis, is important, because there's nothing wrong with being a man. There's nothing wrong with traditional masculinity. What is wrong is not supporting men in being who they are. We're supposed to be who we are. We're supposed to be authentic. Men are not allowed to be authentic in the way, women, where our nature is celebrated, and sort of male nature is not in the same way.
I'm
sorry, that was a lot.
No, that's fascinating, and I think it sounds right to me. I'm wondering if you have thoughts about the timeline for some of this, because I mean, I still see people kind of normies or like, people on Facebook, although I haven't been on Facebook in like 2 months because I got locked out because my password got all screwed up. And like, there is literally no way to get back into Facebook. And at first I was alarmed, and now it's like a great liberation to not have to go there. But when I was there, but I see people who are sort of maybe women, especially who are my age or a little bit older, older baby boomer generation women who are still operating with this baseline assumption that the patriarchy is oppressing us all, and that women still need to catch up, and that there would be more girls in STEM if they weren't discouraged so much. And it's like, I think it's easy for us who listen and talk on podcasts all day and think about this stuff all day to assume that everybody kind of got the memo that this has changed, that there have been, big initiatives to get girls into STEM, for instance, for 20, 25 years now, and that it didn't work for reasons that you have talked about quite eloquently. But I am wondering if you can kind of pinpoint when this started to happen, because, I grew up, I was a kid in the 70s and a teenager in the 80s. And, it was very much like girls can do everything. Girls can do anything. And I even was noticing by the 80s that boys were kind of sidelined, not to the extent that they are now, but if the girls were like raising their hands more in class and like just sort of generally doing better. And obviously it's nothing compared to now. I mean, I think now the vast majority of high school valedictorians are girls. I mean, I don't know if you have the data on that kind of thing, but when do you think the shift really started to be acutely noticeable?
So that's interesting. I've been looking at the data on the masculinity crisis, or whatever you want to call it. And it's definitely not new. It's just that, and it's not becoming more extreme. It's just continuing basically in the same direction with the same degree of difference between the sexes in things like, that's a huge generalization, but I don't see that this is new. And it's been getting a lot of attention lately, which is great. So I think, I don't know about, I cannot speak with authority at this point about exactly when that all started, but there's a lot of good data on that. And I think you're right. I think that's around the 80s. It could even be in the 70s to 80s. But one thing we know for sure is that the feminization of the academy, including grade school, has the proportion of females as teachers at every level, not so much in college and beyond. That's the administration has become they're increasingly female, but in K through 12. There used to be a lot more male teachers. It used to be a respected profession for men. And so women are increasingly taking over. And it's, particularly, I think it's something like 80% of, I think that's about right, in like K through 6, whatever it is, it's very high early on, and it stays pretty high all the way through high school. So that, I think, has just been getting more skewed, since something like the 80s. And the more females you get in academic administration and in teaching, the worse the situation is going to be for boys and young men, unfortunately, because they expect everybody to behave like the girls. They want everyone to behave like the girls, who have get off on organizing their notebooks and marking the pages, and they have fun with that. Boys are just like, how much shit can I stuff in my backpack? I have a 16-year-old. It's disgusting in there. I have pulled out old moldy lunch bits from weeks. It's just girls Sure, some girls do that, but what the larger point is, it's about like organization and paying attention and sitting still and not having ADHD or not ADHD, just a more boyish nature, like wanting to run around and not just sit there and take your proper notes. And it's not like I certainly did not do that. I was a terrible student in high school. I couldn't sit still myself. So there's variation, but there are these patterns. So I think that's been getting a lot worse. And this is very sad because boys are stigmatized and punished for being boys. And
they're failed girls.
It's hard. What?
They're failed girls.
They are failed girls. And now there are programs that in some of the schools that try to fix this problem. And I've looked into exactly what these programs are. And they're well-meaning, but really they're trying to get boys to listen better and to care, to be more empathetic. Just, you can't teach boys how to be more like girls.
Teaching them not to rape. It's exactly.
Well, that's what it's supposed to be. And they're teaching them that there's something wrong with you that we're going to fix. And we're going to take the boyishness out of you. So if that's starting early on, rather than working with what you have, and creating environments that support everybody, you're going to alienate boys at a young age. And they're not going to learn the same stuff as the girls are. They're not going to do as well, but it's not because they don't have the cognitive capacity. It's because the culture is not right for them. And that's a failure of understanding that these are real biological differences. So if we have the cultural narrative in the mostly progressive, mostly female, which is the worst possible combination for supporting boys and acknowledging the role of biology in human behavior, right? Those are the people in charge of the schools. And that's not working for boys in particular. So I think just starting there, that is a recipe for boys to feel lost, left out, not interested in school. They just kind of want to get out of there. And that's what's happening. And I think that is part of why it's getting worse. And then there's the larger cultural narrative, which is, has been a progressive narrative. That's changing now under a conservative administration, where now it's okay, except I think now that it's going a little too far.
Right, which we knew would happen.
That is sort of mean. And, but I get it, is the point. Like, I feel like I understand where that's coming from.
So everything that you just laid out.
Sorry. There's one more thing I wanted to say. What you mentioned Andrew Sullivan's article. So this shift from gay rights to trans rights, I think is where the sex denial really took hold. And that has been very damaging, I think, again, for men in particular. But I think that was around 2015. You have social media, you have a shift from from gay rights to trans rights. So I think that combination of the power of social media to advocate for trans rights by one way is to punish people for talking about sex as a reality, which obviously that's personal for me. That starts to undermine the cultural support for masculinity and femininity, but masculinity in particular, I think, suffered and continues to.
Everything that you've laid out has fed into what is now being called the masculinity crisis. And again, I find this frustrating because it seems clear to me that this is a very real thing and it manifests in any number of ways, but there are still people who sort of aren't paying that much attention or aren't following along, kind of wave this off as like, oh, you're just, this is a moral panic or some kind of like hysteria ginned up by people on the political right. And it's really complex. I mean, this is deep stuff. So I guess that's a very simple question. What do you think men are facing now, men and boys, and what upsets you so much about it?
A lot of women obviously hate men. they of course have fathers and husbands and kids, but they are angry at men and they don't feel that men deserve compassion because men are rapists, say. There's this narrative that because men have this capacity, and because most, serious crime and sexual harassment and sexual assault is obviously committed by men, all men are tarred with the same brush. And I just know after I went on Joe Rogan and talked about male biology and how the evolutionary purpose of aggression and sex drive and all this stuff, I got a lot. It was heartbreaking. I got a lot of feedback from men who were just so thankful that I wasn't stigmatizing them for who they are and how they felt in these drives that so many men have to reckon with, and women don't get. I don't know. Sorry. I have no idea why.
Are you crying because you're a woman?
Reaction. It's just that this is a part of who they are. A lot of men don't feel uncomfortable at various points in their lives with this incredibly strong urge. And they have to learn sexual urge. Yeah. That it's not, yes, women are horny, right? We're all horny. A lot of us love sex and want sex. It's not the same for men. Yeah. It's a sort of desperate hunger often that there's this incredible draw. It's very difficult for them not to look at women's bodies when they're wearing these tiny little shirts with no bra and their nipples are boing. Fine, do what you want, but they're gonna look. And it's hard for men. It's very, very hard not to look. Yeah. A lot of men want to be good men and they feel they're failing and they are sensitive. They're not just these super tough guys that they look like. They're hurt. They feel invalidated. And I'm not making excuses for any bad male behavior, but it's everybody's fault to some degree. If the culture is stigmatizing masculinity, what is the guy who has all these feelings needs support and acknowledgement that they're real. It's okay. But let's all acknowledge that it's real. Not that you're flawed and bad and evil, but that you're a human male. Yeah. And as a society, so many societies over history have figured out that this is an actual issue and that men have to be supported and they have, traditions around puberty and it's celebrated. It's not like now you're some dirty rapist. Sorry, am I going to get in trouble here for saying all this?
No,
probably.
As I'm listening, no, not at all. As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about this. Sort of sounds like men are being taught to hate themselves the way women were taught to hate themselves for a long time. I mean,
so
this
wait,
is sort of
when was the woman taught to hate themselves for who they are naturally, baby mothers and mothers?
I'm thinking, I mean, this is a sort of micro example, and I think what you're talking about is much larger, but hating your body or yes. I have to be very thin. Women have reproductive organs and they have, especially a lot of this is sort of fashion dependent. So if this is a micro example, but if very, very skinny models, for instance, are in vogue,
yes.
then you get anorexia yes. and you get women who are sort of being culturally sent messages about themselves that are counter to their actual nature. Or even women, and we have a lot of young women talking about this, being told, well, if you say that you want to have a family, find a husband and have children, then you are slapping the face of feminism. Then you're yes. actually that's you can't, you're not allowed to say that out loud. So these are real biological impulses that I think, several generations of women have been denied, depending on their, social circles or what kind of environment they're growing up in. If they're growing up in kind of liberal, progressive environments, this was really discouraged. And I think a lot of women are very angry about this. But I want to actually
angry at. They should partially be angry at other women.
Exactly.
Other women. So this isn't just coming from the patriarchy. Other women are brutal to women in terms, that's how women compete. You know, that's a big part of how women compete. That's something that has to do with, I mean, there's a lot of evolutionary theory around sex differences and competition. So, but in the case of the kind of suffering that I was talking about with men, a lot of that is coming from women. I mean, I think a huge amount of that is coming from women. And it's understandable, of course. I mean, women should be pissed off at men who violate their spaces and sexually assault them and, you know, feel threatened just because they're walking down the street. I certainly do. I have my pepper spray, and that's for men who might attack me. Mm-hmm. But I think there's something obviously different. You're right. I mean, women are taught to hate themselves. And I think that's
right.
A different set.
I want to back up a few minutes here, because you said that a lot of women hate men. I want to know if that's really true or if that's a pose. I feel like it's kind of a social posture. Like, oh, I hate men. Men suck. We don't need them. What are men good for? All these kind of tropes. But these same women like really want boyfriends. They feel rejected by men. They're frustrated. They can't find love and commitment. And it's sort of coming out in this way. Do you think that women really hate men?
Okay. Yes, some of them. But I think what I meant was women see men as expendable in a way they don't see other women. Everybody sees men as expendable. I think that's we're much, you know, they can go fight our wars. They can go do all the dangerous jobs. They can save the lives of drowning kids, whatever. So that when someone like me says, well, I think men are suffering or there's a masculinity crisis, I think it's easy to say, well, who can, you know, there's a kind of men deserve it type attitude. And maybe that's not hate. That's not seeing men as vulnerable, which of course they are, just like we are. And I guess that's the thing that gets me. Mm-hmm. But you're right. Women love men. We want men. We love men. But I think, we have got to understand that they're hurt. They get hurt like everybody else when they're denied, dismissed, unseen, sent away to war and unappreciated, etc.
So there was a piece in the New York Times about a week ago. It's been talked about on every podcast.
Wait, was that just a week ago?
Oh, well, a couple of weeks ago, June 20th, excuse me. So it's been talked about on every podcast, but I feel the need to talk about it. This was a Modern Love column. The title, certainly not written by the writer, was "Men, Where Have You Gone? Please Come Back. So many men have retreated from intimacy, hiding behind firewalls, filters, and curated personas, dabbling and scrolling. We miss you." Okay, that was written by editors. The actual writer of the piece is a woman named Rachel Drucker. She is a single woman in her 50s. I think she's 54. And she lives in Chicago, and she's dating. And she's kind of saying a couple of different things in this piece. She talks about the frustration of dating apps and getting men to, you know, be interested in her, want a second date. And she's also just talking about noticing that when she goes out into the world, there just don't seem to be that many men around. She's surrounded by women. Now, I don't think this is a perfect piece. Modern Love is tricky column to pull off. I happen to be exactly the same age. I am also not married. I am single. I don't really date very much because I'm too busy being an independent creator. Too busy trying to keep my head above water. But I actually do relate to this, mostly in the there don't seem to be any men in the world. Like I don't do dating apps, so I can't talk about that. But I go to a party, and this has been true, I mean, basically my whole adult life, mostly because of the social circles I'm in. I'm in media. I was in publishing. I'm in a world that's professional world that's very female dominated. So let's with that caveat. But it's true. Like, you go to a restaurant, it's a bunch of women. Go to a party, it's a bunch of women and like a couple of husbands of a few women. So in that sense, I do think she was sort of getting at something that felt real to me, but you were quite frustrated with this piece.
It rubbed me the wrong way. And maybe it's because I'm not out in the world dating, but I do go out. And I haven't exactly, maybe I'm just not paying enough attention. It rubbed me the wrong way. The writing to me felt a little forced. It didn't kind of grab me, but also what I thought must be coming was some accountability for why they're not out. So you can't imagine what it would be like to be a regular guy who just wants a good relationship and is looking for love, but has gotten the message that if he doesn't really behave perfectly, he could be in big, big trouble.
Right. Yeah.
And he had better not say the wrong thing or make a move when it was unwanted. You know, it just would seem, I think, like a minefield. Women have not given the "we want you back" message. So I just found the tone a little bit patronizing, because of course I think men must have, mature men, adults must have some reasons. I'm not sure they're all home like watching porn or playing video games or whatever. If they're looking for love, I know that there are more people doing that, but also maybe they feel they don't have, there's some economic shifts that are affecting men negatively relative to women. Globalization, automation, all this stuff, affects especially working class men. And women are doing very well, relatively trending well economically. Just saying like, oh, you poor little guys, where are you? We want you back, isn't acknowledging that there might be some really good reasons, and why should they come back?
Yeah.
And I also I think if the other thing, just as one point, I think as a practical matter, if a woman wants to attract a man, this is going to not be popular potentially. I think sometimes it can backfire. If he doesn't get in touch with you, that means he's not interested. Generally, I don't think it means he's afraid. And I think that
he's intimidated.
Doesn't work. If a guy wants you and he's worthy of you, he's gonna, pursue you, and let him pursue you. You don't want to necessarily call the guy who hasn't called you because you assume that he's too scared to call you. If he's too scared to call you, bye-bye. Why would you even want to go there? Anyway, so I wasn't a fan.
Yeah, well, I mean, in fairness, there's another wrinkle to this piece, which is she talks about working for Playboy Digital, I guess probably in the early aughts, and she's there's sort of like 5 pieces in one here.
Okay, but how did that explain? Then shouldn't she sort of know better?
Yeah, I mean, she says, I spent over a decade behind the curtain of digital desire as the custodian of records for Playboy and its affiliated hardcore properties, including sites like Spice TV. I was responsible for some of the most infringed upon adult content in the world.
Wait, what does that mean, infringed upon?
Well, I worked closely with copyright attorneys and marketing teams to understand exactly what it took to get a man to pay for the content he could easily find for free. We knew what worked. We knew how to frame a face, a gesture, a moment of implication, just enough to ignite fantasy and open a wallet. I came to understand what cues tempt the average 18 to 36-year-old cis of course, heterosexual man. So anyway, this is interesting. I wish this is the kind of piece that I love to have somebody in my writing workshop turn in, because there's so much going on here. But yeah, I thought that this piece was interesting because I do notice just a lot of women in the world, but that's because I live in Los Angeles and sometimes in New York. She lives in Chicago though, when she's saying this, which surprised me a little bit. So,
so you mean youth? Yeah. And I don't know what age, I mean, at that age, so she thinks those sort of probably divorced men in their 50s are just staying home.
No, they're going out with younger women. No.
Like,
the thing is, they're going out with 35-year-old women. They're not going.
Well,
out with
only if they're
55-year-old
top of the heap.
I think increasingly that's not true, actually. I mean, this is a whole other conversation. But I think what I notice is that women in their 20s, the men are, I mean, this is to your point, actually, the men are so unavailable and so really have no agency at all, that these young, very young women are willing to date much, much older and not masters of the universe guy. They're willing to date an older guy who really doesn't have a job, but can tell them about, books he's read and, kind of give her an education in various things. And that's, I have noticed that for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. But we were talking earlier, and I want to make sure we sort of unspool this before we wrap up. I mean, you have some ideas just about the privilege that women have as people who can have babies. Like this, I'm trying to sort of understand what
I wouldn't necessarily
thinking
say it is a privilege. I think it's a privilege, but I wouldn't want to make that's just a fact.
It's a thing that women automatically have a purpose. Is this kind of what you're getting at? Even if you don't want to have babies, we are. We have a psychology of knowing on some level, not necessarily even consciously, but that has to do with why femininity is often celebrated, because of the maternal, nurturing nature. So we are, in fact, more empathetic and nurturing. That's all true. Yeah. Okay, but you were sort of suggesting that this is like a cultural advantage or some way that men are really suffering because, they literally don't have a purpose. That's a very reductive way of putting it, but is that kind of what you're saying?
So what's interesting about humans and unusual is that in most mammals, so in 95% of mammals, the male contributes only sperm. The female, if there is any parental care, which in mammals there is, because in mammals there's internal gestation and lactation, so there's always female parental care, and it's what's called obligate. If the offspring is going to survive, it's because the mother is allowing another mammal to suck on her nipple, right? And to produce blood, to produce milk. And she's totally into that because of how she evolved and what our whole neuroendocrine system does. It makes parenting, we're motivated to do it. It's rewarding, even though really, if we didn't have that stuff, it would just be a total pain in the ass. But there's this massive motivation and reward and physical capacity to do this. And obviously, culture depends on women having children and being good mothers, and that we don't have to learn. Yes, there's some learning involved and there's having relatives support you, but really a lot of this comes naturally. Our bodies are designed to do this. And if we just do what our bodies are designed to do, which yes, is to reproduce, men are also designed to reproduce, but we use our bodies to do it in a specific way. But in humans, when men can invest in offspring, they often do invest in their offspring, but they don't have to, right? So there's a choice. And the culture shapes that choice. The culture shapes how that role plays out for men. The culture around marriage is incredibly important. Is this a culture that supports marriage around childbearing and encouraging dads to be parents? Or is this a culture where the fathers contribute sperm and then bugger off? So the way that men reproduce has everything to do with whether they acquire a mate. How do they acquire a mate? They have to compete with other men. So competition is an essential part of male reproduction, but how they compete, whether it's through aggression and violence, or whether it's through getting the best job that they can get, or going to the gym, or whatever, or, their social status is incredibly important. So how they compete is super culturally dependent. How many females there are available for every man depends on culture and what kind of mating system that culture supports. Whether a man can have 5 wives or every man can only have 1 wife. But now we have social media where a small number of men are getting a huge number of matings. So, all that is very complicated. But the main point is that for women, the cultural norms are not as important for that sense of meaning and purpose as they are for men. Men need to know how do I go about this? What are the norms here? Can I do to gain status, to be respected, to be attractive, desired? These are all culturally dependent. A woman generally needs to be young and healthy, and being attractive signals those things. So yeah, I think we've dismantled a lot of the evolved, more traditional kinds of cultural norms that might have done a better job supporting men. It doesn't mean those were the best norms, those were the most just or moral, but they certainly gave men a clearer idea, I think, in the past, or even in other cultures around the world, about what their social role should be. But when we start denying the reality of sex and say that males and females are the same, people can change sex, you've really dismantled, I think, important kind of foundation and infrastructure for acknowledging what each sex needs, what the differences are. Some cultures take this to an extreme and have completely very sex segregated cultures with different norms for each sex. That's taking it too far. But we've taken it much too far in the other direction. And that's a complicated problem. And that's something I'm trying to think about and work on.
Do you blame the second wave feminists for this? The free to be you and me message. It was mommies can be plumbers too, but then, that kind of migrated into women enjoy casual sex just as men. And you have now all of these very young women saying oh my gosh, I actually don't enjoy this, but I feel like I need to.
Yes, you're getting into Louise Perry territory and all these interesting arguments, which I think are super interesting. And I think women should have the freedom to do whatever they want and within reason, and so should men. And I believe that people should be able to express their sexuality or their sex role and however they see fit without infringing on other people's rights. But so I think within, ideally we acknowledge the reality of sex-based differences and support people in these general sex roles and have some clear standards, but allow flexibility and encourage equality of opportunity across the board in terms of self-expression and professional opportunities. We're never going to be equal, and their interests are never going to be equal. Professional outcomes, I hope, will never be equal, because if they are, it means there's been too much social engineering or economic disadvantage for women when they feel they have to take more masculine jobs that they're not necessarily as interested in, because those tend to be the jobs that pay better. So,
right.
Yeah.
But there's not really equality of opportunity when women are the ones that have the babies.
That's
by definition.
Totally right. And I agree. And I think that that's one area where when we acknowledge that males and females, again, it's about obvious, very basic biological differences. You have to support women in having babies and make that a cool thing to do, and make staying home with your kids, if that's what you choose, financially viable, economically viable for your family, and even productive. And I think this, encouraging, making it cool. It's only cool to have some big career that, that's the only sort of cool choice for women. That doesn't really work either. There should be more flexibility. And I think the flexibility is for a lot of women just working part-time around the time they have kids, and then being able to join the workforce and, in full force again after their kids reach a certain age.
Well, speaking of the way this has all been muddied by, confusions around gender identity, what's sex and what's gender. Also, by the way, I said this a couple of weeks ago somewhere. I feel like part of the reason that gender emerged as a term and just something people were saying a lot was that they didn't want to say sex. Like it became interchangeable because you had kind of prudish politicians and others just not wanting to use the word sex. So they said gender, and then it just became a total mess. But, the reason I bring this up is, so your husband, Alex Byrne, is a philosophy professor at MIT. He's been a guest on this podcast. He had a book come out last year called Trouble with Gender. It was a play on Judith Butler's famous Gender Trouble. Hold that up. Be a good wife. So this book explores conceptual distinctions and debates around sex and gender. He's now in a bit of gender trouble himself this past week. What are things like around your breakfast table these days?
Yeah, it's been interesting and challenging, especially for Alex. So Alex he was invited to contribute to the Health and Human Services report that was commissioned by the Trump administration to produce a report that evaluated the evidence base, sort of like the Cass report in the UK did relatively recently. And this included not just examining the evidence base, but also looking at the history of sex and gender in this country and ethical issues. And so he agreed to participate. They wanted to make sure they had a politically diverse team of 9 people. So there were Republicans and Democrats on this team, just a really highly qualified, I know who was on the team, and the report is still anonymous. The names will be published eventually, but Alex was one of the people, and he was outed because his name was buried in the metadata of the appendix on the PDF. And some trans rights activists exposed this on Blue Sky and came after him. So he decided to write an article, since this was already leaked, for the Washington Post on why he participated and what the value of this report was. It wasn't an easy decision to him. He did not vote for Trump. This wasn't an easy decision for him when he agreed to participate, but he thought ultimately, if this report is going to come out, he would be able to contribute something meaningful. And he really did. He's an incredibly clear thinker and writer, and everybody should read the report. It's up on the Health and Human Services website. And the Washington Post, a few weeks before Alex's article, had published an article that essentially reviewed the report and gave it a glowing review. And this is the Washington Post reviewing a report commissioned by the Trump administration. So Alex is, again, a professor of philosophy. He's a chaired professor. He's an esteemed philosopher and has a long and very strong career. And also he was chair for a long time of that department, and has good relationships with everybody, and including the grad students. And they well, we don't know for sure who wrote it. We're pretty sure we know who wrote it, but it's not signed. There's a letter that against him, essentially, ostensibly, for participating in the Health and Human Services report. And everyone can read that. Maybe you have show notes or something that you can link to the letter. And the letter, so it's a public letter signed by people, I think, all over the world, a lot of grad students, a lot of undergrad, and I think there were about 50 professors. So not a huge number of professors, and only one professor in his, there's two professors in his department, but his department is philosophy and linguistics. So one linguistics professor and one philosophy professor, a close colleague of his, who signed the letter. So this is, and sorry, it accused him of professional ethical lapse or lack of judgment. Used some very strong language to argue that no scholar should cooperate with the Trump administration, and that he is essentially harming trans people by cooperating with the Trump administration, and that his earlier work has brought great harm to trans people, because in his book, for instance, he argues for the definition of woman as adult human female, because he's a philosopher and he thought that the definition was getting all muddied up in feminist philosophy, which he thought wasn't doing a great job of sorting out these complex issues of sex and gender. And he did an incredible job. The book, I think it's an amazingly clear and entertaining and just deeply, deeply researched. And I know that because I'm his wife and I see what he does and everything he reads and how much time he spends in his office researching and writing. And he did a great job. He's doing fucking philosophy. And this is what is so annoying and sad, is that you would think this would be the one holdout where the faculty, the established, older, famous faculty in philosophy would be defending Alex's right to explore these issues, and to not to be censoring and trying to cancel and intimidate and send a signal to the young, to young scholars all over the world that this is what we in MIT philosophy believe is the right way to go, is to take out an open letter without knocking on Alex's door, without sending an email to him saying we're posting this public letter. They didn't even let him know. So he found out, through somebody else, that there was this letter. One of the first signers is this close colleague of his, a famous feminist philosopher. And, there was a trans woman, grad student who he had a friendly relationship with, and they all had good relationships. Yeah. But they seem to feel, and this is what happened in my case. If you read the tweet against me, one of the things it clearly says is, we want everybody in the world, literally, we want everyone to know that we're a safe place for trans people and that we all, we don't share her views, right? We don't share her views. You shouldn't feel threatened. Instead of, we've got a great diversity of views in this department. We, respect people with different beliefs or different political orientations, and there's no reason to feel intimidated. This is what you do in college. This is what you do in grad school. You debate and you dive into things. Yeah. Instead, they're training these young people. They're still doing it right now.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
I made a big deal out of it on Twitter. Richard Dawkins retweeted the open letter and Alex's incredible response. I have to take a little bit of credit. Because it did, you want to, and his response is just exactly, he's the adult in the room. It should be about ideas. And there was no sort of evidence given for the claims made against him. And luckily, it's been picked up. His response has been picked up and widely praised. But again, this is what goes on inside the institution, inside the department. And hopefully, we'll see if there is a response, but I hope there is some reiteration of the values in philosophy and in the department, which are collegiality, respect for diversity of viewpoints, engaging across disagreement, not by ad hominem attacks, but by making clear arguments and using logic and being respectful, which is what Alex has always been, because he's a true philosopher.
Is he the oldest person in the mix here?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
Okay. Just curious.
So it's not a generational, the fact that the grad students and a lot of undergrads sign is certainly a generational difference, but that's what's sad, that so many of them think that this is appropriate. And that the senior philosophers are saying, who are modeling like what happens in feminist philosophy, how you're supposed to behave. It's activist. It is activism before scholar. It seems like before
it's so counter to everything that education is supposed to represent. I mean, I remember having Kathleen Stock on the podcast several years ago talking about material girls, and she's a philosophy professor, and she was similarly run out of University of Sussex, I think. And she was saying, philosophy departments of all places, like this is the department where philosophers, they will debate endlessly anything at all, dispassionately and objectively, except for this one issue, where they just absolutely lose all of their intellectual
race
standards.
is another issue. Okay. Peter Singer also touches on a lot of issues that even don't have to do with race. Or
Peter Singer is he a
animal
rights ethicist sort of?
Like he might argue that in some cases it's justifiable, late term abortions or infanticide or certain disorders, like maybe the kid shouldn't be kept alive, and people freak out about that, and understandably.
But that's not like a style meme. Like, I get that that's radioactive.
Yeah, I'm just saying a lot of this. So there are issues now with this activism. There's some sort of justification for these attacks because people are arguing that it's harming people, that it's like lives are at stake or it's doing real violence. And that's always the argument. That was the argument made in my case.
Yeah.
That this is dangerous.
Yeah.
So
we need to wrap up. I always love talking with you, but I just want to ask you briefly. I know I'm sure you don't want to talk too much about your son, but you do have a 16-year-old son, and you're writing about these issues all the time. Alex is writing about them. You're watching this male person grow up. How much information do you glean just from being the mother of a son?
A lot. He's 16. One of the most interesting things, just given my work, is that status really is so important, and each kid finds their own way. He's not particularly athletic, so he's drawn towards competition, but it's not through sports. It's not through this obvious mechanism that so many boys take advantage of. He likes to debate. I don't know how that happened with me and Alex sitting at the table going at each other constantly. He's in debate club. He now has a podcast where he grills his friends about their religious beliefs. It's fascinating. They're so mature. They're smart and mature and thoughtful and have so much knowledge, way more than I ever had, at 16. So it's just really interesting that there are these different ways that boys find to compete with each other. And there's a lot of status consciousness, as there is in girls, but it sort of takes a different form. But I think, information, it's really more this gut feeling of wanting him to feel just totally fine about who he is. And then especially as a kid going through puberty. And it's not just about him. I don't want to make it personal about him. But as a boy comes to feel new drives that can feel overpowering, you know, I just think they should feel that that's just as wonderful, like, and enjoyable and pure and good as girls feel, or as we lead girls to feel about becoming a woman, you know. And I want to take any shame or stigma away from that, because the schools are teaching them as part of the rape pyramid. There's something like a rape pyramid that you had to learn 2 years ago.
They got rid of the food pyramid, but they swapped it out for a rape pyramid, it sounds like. Okay.
I think that's what it's called. Well, it might not be called rape pyramid, but rape is certainly at the top. But like things on the bottom are saying boys will be boys.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And that I was thinking about calling my book Let Boys Be Boys. But what it means is acknowledge that there's nothing wrong with masculinity, and that we have to allow rough and tumble play, for instance. We have to allow that because that's what boys and male animals need to do to learn how to regulate their aggression and to be able to cooperate with other males and what their bodies can do. That's part of an evolved process that culturally we're not always supporting, right? And if you understand the biology, you understand that that's necessary. And Griffin wanted to do that all the time, even though he's not like this rough boy. That was just part of his childhood. So it just helps me to see and to like understand on a gut level, of course, having a kid who's innocent, you know, not a man, not my like wonderful father or husband, but an innocent boy who's growing up, that this is all natural and it's all okay. And it's up to us to support who they are, you know, and not stigmatize masculinity.
Well, Carole, thank you for talking with me. Thank you for everything that you do. I love the way you think about all of this stuff, and you articulate it so well. So I really appreciate it. And I want to just say again, you're going to be joining us in October for our Unspeakeasy weekend.
Can't forget that.
Oh, there's your book. Yes.
My own book.
Yes. I can't read. Tell us the
subtitle. The Story of Testosterone, the hormone that dominates and divides us. So,
okay. And
you have two books to choose from.
Everybody, if you love this conversation, you should think about coming and joining us on our Unspeakeasy on steroids weekend retreat, October 11th and 12th in New York City. You're going to be one of many speakers.
I'm so excited.
It's like a mini ideas festival. People are like, what is this? I don't understand. I'm sure you don't understand it. It's your intellectual heroes are going to talk. I will interview some of you. You'll talk amongst yourselves. And then instead of audience Q&A, it's going to open up into like a real discussion. The attendees will be able to just interact, and everything is off the record, no social media, nothing is recorded. That's really the best part of this. And people have already signed up from all over the place, men and women. This is a co-ed event. So I'm delighted. I would just like to say the one
that I did with you in Northampton was such a pleasure. And I so enjoyed the conversation with, getting to know the people who were there, and the kind of really intimate conversation and all the different views that came to the surface. And it was, I think, enlightening and just productive for everybody.
Yes.
It was special. It was really special.
Yeah, it was great. It was in Woodstock, New York, actually. I love that you remembered it as being in Northampton. I love Northampton, so that's a compliment.
I had it on the brain.
Sorry. Yeah, you joined us for one of our signature women's overnight retreats, and that was amazing. We loved having you there. So this one is not overnight. Sorry, guys. It's co-ed. It's not a sleepover. It's both days. It's going to be like 9 to 5 each day. We're going to give everybody lunch, and it'll be great. So I will see you then, if not sooner. But thank you so much for talking with me, and
thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your summer.
Okay, you too.
That was my interview with Dr. Carole Hooven. She's an evolutionary biologist and the author of the 2021 book, T, The Story of Testosterone, the hormone that dominates and divides us. What else do you need to know about her? She's a non-resident senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. She's always doing interesting things. I will link to where you can find her, where you can find out about her fascinating and brilliant husband, Alex Byrne, who's been a guest on this podcast, and anything else you want to know. I talked enough at the beginning, so I'm going to keep this brief. Again, this is the Unspeakable podcast, slowly being named the Unspeakeasy. Thank you, as always, for listening. Thank you for supporting the podcast and my work. And I will be back next week, I promise, with another super nuanced guest. See you then.